Good morning, everyone. This is John with Gun.Deals, and today we are going to be talking about, do you actually need all that stuff on your rifle, or is it only there because it looks cool or some Instagram influencer sold something to you? But before we get into that, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe, as all that is free and does help us out quite a bit. And before we get into it, go ahead and comment your worst accessory you've ever put on a rifle or pistol in the comments down below. Getting into the topic of the video, do you actually need all of that stuff sitting on your rifle? And need is not always the best argumentation, which is why I tend to stay away strictly from a need argument, because there's all sorts of fun things like preference and enjoyment and cool factor that people like to do when they're kitting out their rifles or pistols or setup or wherever it might be. But when I talk about need, I want to be very specific. It's related to your application for that system, whatever it may be. So need may not be the perfect correct term, but if we start throwing on a bunch of extra stuff that starts to hinder what the setup is actually for, and it's only there because it looks cool or you think you need it or whatever it might be, then maybe it's time to dial back just a little bit. Now, for reference, I have this 18-inch SPR with a ballistic advantage SPR profile barrel, which is essentially just a heavy barrel. We have a 2.5 to 8 Leopold optic on there, which is no longer made, very hard to find, with a top dot. We have a B.E. Myers Mall that Andrew Vachon sent me. Actually, a lot of the stuff in this video and behind me is sent in by Andrew Vachon, so you can actually thank him for the topic of this video. And then, of course, we also have a HRT Aus light, which is one of the bigger, heavier lights on the market. And so you see all this stuff and you're like, oh, John can do just about anything with that rifle. But if I ask myself, what am I actually going to use it for? Well, the answer is pretty simple, and that's hitting steel targets between 0 and 800 yards. So when we look at the rest of the setup, do we really need a B. Myers Mall sitting off the side? No. Do you need a white light for that? No. I guess people online tell you need to have a white light on all of your rifles, even if it's just a dedicated plinking rifle for some reason. And what we end up with is a 12-pound rifle, probably even a little bit heavier than that, maybe even 13 pounds with everything on here, that these accoutrements up front don't do anything to help me achieve the goal of this system. If we attack the topic from the opposite side of that and say, what do we actually need to achieve the desired results? Well, we have an 18-inch barrel, which gives us enough velocity. This specific barrel will do about 1 MOA with good ammo, which again is sufficient for the task at hand. We have a 2.5 to 8 optic with pretty good glass, which is enough for the desired distance, though most people would probably want more. And we have a LaRue MB2 two-stage trigger, which is one of the better budget triggers on the market. And those are the things that I actually need to accomplish that task. But then we also have a white light and one of the most expensive and heaviest laser aiming modules on the market. The red dot on top I'm actually going to give a pass, because you can use a red dot as a quick aiming reference. So if you're scanning for multiple targets, say between 5 and 700 yards, you can get onto target with the red dot and then use the glass for your precise aiming with your holdovers or whatever it might be. Now, this rifle might be able to do everything. However, if you were going to be doing real night vision shooting with active aiming, well, it's pretty miserable to do that, because you have a helmet on, you have a PVS 14 or whatever it might be in front of your eyeballs, and then you're holding out a 14-pound rifle, probably even with a suppressor on the end of it, making it even heavier and more unwieldy. So actually shooting with this thing under nods for any period of time longer than a couple minutes is just not going to be a pleasant experience. Now, I've been told a couple minutes might be satisfactory for some people, but most are probably looking for a little bit longer experience. One of the most common pitfalls, other than restless rifle syndrome, is people throwing on basically everything onto every setup for a do everything rifle, which means that it's not particularly good at anything and it's not even pleasant to use, rather than being a little bit more focused, simple, and streamlined. If I wanted to streamline this setup specifically, but maintain some of the capability, I think it's a pretty easy task. The first thing to do is just ditch the B.E. Myers Mall and put that on something more appropriate for a quote-unquote night fighting rifle. And for the white light, you can go with a light about half the size and weight with the relatively similar performance if you just need some white light capability. If you wanted to keep that hybrid passive plus performance with the top mounted red dot, which I would keep the optic stack the same. You could also go with a vampire light, so it's white light plus IR, so you still have a little bit of night vision performance if you really wanted to at extended distances, but just that simple lighting adjustment would save you about £1 on the front of your rifle and $4,000, which makes it one of the more expensive pounds out there. And that sort of thing isn't just exclusive to rifles, of course. You can do the exact same thing with pistols. You can swap out your recoil springs, your guide rods to go with a heavy brass guide rod. You can throw on very aggressive grip texture, brass grips for even more weight, whatever optic you want, a trigger job. You can even add even more brass with a heavy brass base plate to give you extra 5 rounds in your magazine if you're into that sort of thing, and you have a fully tricked out gun that punches paper at 5 yards. Now, this is obviously a dedicated competition carry optics gun, but one of the more common add-ons that I've seen for people with quote-unquote duty firearms is like Glocks with ram jets, with mag wells, with grip tape, with whatever it might be, because in your quest for endless personalization, you end up looking like everybody else out there. Of course, buying parts, add-ons, accessories, whatever it might be to tune your weapon of choice to your personal preferences is not a bad thing. We all like to tweak and tune a little bit, but what it comes back to for me is, again, the application. Are those things that you're adding on to your rifle, handgun, AK, what have you, actually helping you achieve your goal with that specific system, or is it just on there to look cool and to flex on the gram? Which, again, if that's your thing, that's all right, but if you're actually trying to achieve something, hopefully everything that you have on your system has at least a internal excuse for being there. And that's probably a reason why we've seen this retro simplistic rifle craze kind of take over sections of the industry, this clone market, whatever it might be, is because people have accessorized their systems to the nth degree, and then they go back and try something that's truly simple in terms of what it's designed to do, and they're like, wow, this is actually really nice. It does the thing it's supposed to do, doesn't weigh 12 pounds, doesn't cost me $6,000 to set up. That's actually kind of nice. It's kind of refreshing. So again, Hobbs says time is a flat circle, and it all just comes back around. And unfortunately, retro rifles are now rifles that I was growing up with, watching as a kid. So that's cool. The point being, dear viewer, if you have a specific application in mind, just make sure that those accoutrements that you're adding to your system are actually helping you achieve that, rather than just look cool, unless that's your thing, and you can just disregard this entire video. But with all that out of the way, gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. Peace off.
Stand by.
Oh, well, 5 for 5.